Welcome back. I'm John Fugelsang, joined by Frank Conniff of Mystery Science Theater, aka TV's Frank, and Melissa Stokowski. We're so happy you could join us, and I'm so happy to talk about Enlighten Us. You may have seen the promos for this film already on CNN. Let me be the first of your friends to tell you I really hope you watch it. It chronicles the rise and fall and rise again of James Arthur Ray in the story of one of our most famous motivational rock stars, fall from grace and attempts to recover grace after the 2 years he served in prison for negligent homicide and the 2009 deaths of 3 clients in a sweat lodge. Enlighten Us is a deeply powerful film about death and rebirth, about grace, and about an industry that many of us don't get an inside look on. It's a real pleasure to welcome director Jenny Karchman to the show. She's been making award-winning docs for years for PBS and CNN Films and HBO. And it's also a great pleasure to welcome someone I've never met, but we have many mutual acquaintances, James Arthur Ray himself. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Thank
it's good to be here.
so much.
Thank you. Jenny, your movie's remarkable. I think a lot of people, in the case of this film, will come for the titillation and stay for the inspiration. And obviously, folks who have only heard bits and pieces of James's story will tune in wanting to know what this story is all about. And it's interesting how much surprises you pack into the film's running time. What was it that made you want to make your next film about James's journey?
Exactly what you described. I read about the story from the news, from cable news, from the newspaper. I have not been involved in the self-help world. I know very little about it. But I read about this story, and I read how popular the self-help industry is, and I thought, if it's an $11 billion industry, there's a whole lot of customers for this. The worst possible event happened when people were on their search to better themselves. Their lives were lost. And how did they get there? And who were these people? And who are the people who lead these events? And how did they all meet inside the sweat lodge? How did this happen?
How did you approach James about getting him to open up about such horrible events and all the struggles he's been through since then? How did you plan on getting him to say yes?
You never plan on somebody saying yes. You always plan on them saying no. Well, that's how I approach subjects, because usually they say no, and then you say, why not? So we contacted James' attorney. James was in the process of filing an appeal. We talked to his attorney. His attorney is an amazing man, very smart, and very open to hearing what we were interested in doing. We explained to him that we really wanted to tell a story without the judgment. We really wanted to tell a story that tells the story from each person's point of view. And I didn't want to bash anybody, and I definitely didn't want to bash the industry.
No, this film makes me wish news was like this. I mean, you bring an objectivity to it where all sides get to raise their thoughts and opinions. But in the end, it's a film that leaves the eventual decision to the viewer's discretion, while at the same time being very fair and really having the same kind of grace in it, I think, that's documented by James's struggle. James, I didn't know before watching the film that it was an $11 billion a year industry, and there's lots of words people throw around: motivational speaker, self-help industry. How do you describe the industry that you so excelled in, and how would you describe your role in it?
Well, I resist labels. And so even though people will put me in a category, I've never aspired to be a self-help guru. I'm not a guru. I'm not a motivational speaker. What I see myself as is a catalyst to help you and everyone I'm blessed to serve find their innate abilities, their unique gifts and genius, and then be able to move those into action. I think that's a really important message, particularly in today's time, where the most recent Gallup poll tells us 71% of the people surveyed are unhappy in their work. That's nearly 3/4 of the population, John. And so what that means is that most people are hitting the snooze button every day and dragging themselves into a place that they don't enjoy, hoping for a weekend, hoping for a day off, hoping for a vacation. And that's no way to live. And so what I see myself as, and always have, as a catalyst to help you find what you're here to do. You see, for me, what I do is not a career, it's a calling. And it's a purpose. And so therefore, what I want to do is help you find that, and everyone I'm blessed to serve do the same.
Watching the film and being reminded of those early days of The Secret and the clips of you on Oprah, it really made me realize that, you know, getting people to go for their dreams was you going for your dream. You were on stage going for the same thing that they were going for in the audience. Is that fair to say?
It's very fair to say. I think, you know, for me to be able to help you, I've got to do it. And so that's the credentials.
What drove that in you? What made you want to pursue that for yourself?
I've been a fairly unique, nonconformist, independent thinker for all of my days. You know, I grew up in the household of a Protestant minister down the street from Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I began my search at probably 18 years of age to find the answers of what life is about, because I wasn't getting the answers for me. And so I've been driven that entire time primarily to solve my own pain and to rise above that and be able to live the life that I feel I'm here to live. And once you find that, then it becomes really magical.
The film is very frank. You would agree with that?
I would agree with that.
It's frank in terms of your parents and how your mom and dad were rather critical when you were growing up. Do you think that's fair? And I'm asking because I'm wondering, did that in any way motivate you to become the successful man you became?
Absolutely. I mean, in my early years, I did a lot of everything that I was up to attempt to feel good enough for my father, who was Superman in my eyes. Mother was, when I was growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, everything was a sin that was fun. Everything, right? Even playing pinball was a sin.
Your mom thought pinball was a form of gambling.
A form of gambling. See, you get this, John.
No, right? it's quite a movie.
Yeah. And so yes, there was that struggle, and part of that struggle is the rebirth, I'll use the word that you use, which I think is profound, that came at a point where I was like, okay, I'm good enough for me, and now I'm going to pursue what I want to pursue. My father groomed me to go into the ministry, and
Which you did, kind of.
Yeah, I think you did too.
Well, he thought so too. At one
Eventually.
point, eventually, yeah. But there was a lot of friction in the meantime,
Yeah.
and so, yeah. Anyway, he finally came to a point where he said, "You do what I do. You just do it in a different way."
Yeah, because it doesn't go against organized religion in any way. And essentially, I think it could be a good compliment for people who are deeply religious.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't even call it evangelizing in a way. I do think that in many ways, The Secret is a logical outgrowth of many of the tenets of Christianity and Buddhism. Jenny, I know that you weren't familiar with this world. What surprised you the most as you did your prep for the film?
The historical component of it, and how this, the idea of a group of people coming into a room in these seminars, what that grew out of, that was new to me. I didn't know that it had these deep roots, but also that for me, this kind of seminar is just like church, where you're in the congregation with so many other people, and you are experiencing the energy of the room. And I think when I was talking to the participants and also I watched about 2 months worth of James's prior seminars. When I was watching everything, what I felt the most was it was the energy of the congregation. It was the energy of the room and the people in the room that were making things happen.
Mm-hmm.
James was there, of course, and leading the exercises and talking, but it was this euphoria that I could see in the eyes of the people who were there, and when they would go through the various exercises, it would just kind of appear. And I can imagine that was a very powerful feeling. I actually had never attended one of James's seminars when he was at the height of his career.
Mm-hmm. James, in watching it, I felt a lot of interesting parallels to your story, because we were both born to parents who had God on professional speed dial, if you will,
Yes.
or had God as a as a professional colleague.
Intravenously.
Yeah, he was a work relationship too for our parents, and as a comedian, you know, and as a political comedian who talks about religion, I know the experience of going on stage for an hour in front of a large crowd and entertaining them and giving a performance that will hopefully inspire and entertain and get an emotional response out of the crowd. And watching you give your lectures, it really occurred to me, this is a performance, what you did, a very well-crafted monologue, if you will, that definitely got an emotional response out of your audience. And I'm wondering if you can take us inside what it's like for you. When you were at the height of this fame and when you were speaking to these large crowds, as the child who had such a hard time impressing his parents, to suddenly be getting the love and devotion from all these strangers in a big room, what did that do for you emotionally in the moment on stage?
Well, it definitely puts you into a flow state. And there's, you know, professor of psychology Mihai Csikszentmihalyi wrote the book Flow. I don't know if you read that, but it's a point where there's an energy, call it God, call it infinite intelligence, whatever you want to label it.
Catholics who call it the presence of the Holy Spirit.
There you go.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter in my world what you label it, but something's coming through you. It's not coming from you. And that's a big difference. You know, it's also part of the morphogenetic field in the room, and there's research out of Harvard by Christakis and Fowler that talks about the power of the people around you, community.
But what did it do for you emotionally?
It was a high. It was an incredible high, and it was a moment where I knew this for me is not a career, it's a calling. It's which I've already mentioned, and it's my purpose, and there's no greater satisfaction in my world than someone coming to me and saying, you know, I've grown my business, I've increased my income, I have a better relationship, I've lost 30 pounds, whatever it is that is up for them, and you've helped me do that. I mean, that's the greatest remuneration that you could ever receive.
Obviously, Jenny, this would have been a very compelling film if the story ended there. But when you address the deaths at the Sweat Lodge, you made the narrative choice to thread it through the film rather than make it a linear midpoint of the movie. Why did you choose to make the tragedy a running motif through the film?
For me, it was very important that the participants who were in the Sweat Lodge, that you understood their trajectory in James's world, so that they didn't just show up in the Sweat Lodge there to participate in this really intense event. They were students of James's who had participated in the various stages of the courses that James had offered, and that they were really committed to James's ideas and his teachings. And I wanted it to be a moment where everybody meets together in the Sweat Lodge, having a real sense of what they were doing and a purpose for what they're doing, and not just seem like some crazy activity that seemed, you know, out of the blue. It had a real
Well, you did what the media didn't do. You put the events in context.
Yes, you said that better than I did.
You made a great movie.
Thank you.
You don't dwell too much on James's experience in prison. Was that a deliberate choice of the two of you?
That was a deliberate, well, there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, I don't have footage. The other thing is that you only have 90 minutes to tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like that, for me, some things have to stay and some things have to go.
Yeah.
And that's a completely, it's a whole nother tangent, and we could do a whole thing on that experience, but I couldn't wrestle it into the time.
James, we used to call prisons penitentiaries,
Right.
where people went to be penitent. Now it's cages. Malcolm X wrote extensively in his book about the transformative experience his years in prison had on him and his ministry.
As did Nelson Mandela.
As did Nelson Mandela, as did many. What did your experience in prison give you, and how do you feel the film handles that?
Well, I think the prison experience gave me a lot, and the entire 7 years gave me more.
Mm-hmm.
So it all kind of plays together. You know, when I went to prison, and it's, you know, I just need to say, I take full and complete responsibility for what happened. There, it was my idea. I conceived it. Everyone believed in it, and I led it and also participated. And so, as a leader, we checked off. My team and I checked off all the boxes as we had for 4 years, consecutive years prior, and I really thought we were safe. I really did. And
did the fact that these folks in the Sweat Lodge were known to you, were, I wouldn't say friends, but they were people that you had built relationships with, do you think that that made it feel more convivial and may have allowed some corners to be cut?
I don't believe, that there were corners that were cut.
Permits and such, though, I mean.
No, there were no permits or any corners that were cut. And that, there's a lot bigger story here than what is covered in the documentary or has ever been covered in the press. And so, that was part of my agreement to participate in this film, as I was told initially that story would be told, and it wasn't told. And I'll just kind of leave it at that.
You don't feel the story was told within the confines of the film?
I don't. Not the full story. And I'm interested to hear your interpretation that it's inspirational, because that does my heart glad.
No, I'd like to talk about it, sure, because I do think that the portions of showing your life, there's not a lot of people who will allow a camera crew to follow them around after they've lost everything. And it does nothing to diminish the tragedy of the loss of those folks to talk about how much you lost. Your fortune, your home, people who are close to you, a reputation. And what is most moving about the film, I find, is the grace that you must wrap yourself in every day, knowing what people say about you, knowing what has been said about you, knowing the mountain you have to climb still. I think a lot of people would go through what you went through and get out of jail and want to go into as different an occupation as possible and disappear, change your name. You made the choice not to do that, and to me that's one of the most compelling parts of the movie, is how you decided to suffer the slings and arrows and endure what is said about you and go back into this same field, albeit at a very different level than when you were, on Oprah and back in these giant rooms. There's a lot of pain in the movie, and I wonder, what was it, James, that convinced you to let Jenny and her crew follow you around and document, undoubtedly, the most painful period of your life?
Well, as I said earlier, the original idea that I was presented with, and my team was presented with around the film, is not what was ultimately created. And, had that been created, again, there's a whole nother story here that has not really been told.
Okay.
The other side of that is that we all go through pain, all of us. And to my knowledge, there's no one in this industry who will allow you to peer behind the curtain. And
that's true.
I wanted to allow you to peer behind the curtain and see, guess what? People called him a rock star, and now he's at rock bottom. And he's human, and he hurts, and he cares. And maybe if he can do that, I can get through mine as well.
That's what I like most about the film. I mean, and that's what's most inspiring about it.
That really feels good to me, because that was part of my intention.
You are promoting the movie. You're here with Jenny, so you must approve of it to some degree, of the final version of the film.
Well, it's really not about me. It's about the 71% of the people in this world who are unhappy and disengaged from their daily life. And
I disagree. I think it's about you.
See, but I am only me to the degree that I am able to impact and to share and to support the people that I'm honored to do that with. And so consequently, I believe, in fact I know, that I'm much more equipped to do that now than I ever was before, because your arm is not long enough to help people in the valley when you're on the top of the mountain.
Have you two had conflicts over this issue, over the film?
This is the first expression of that I've heard.
Oh, okay.
I've heard James.
You're breaking news here.
Yeah, it is. Flash.
Well,
I've heard James respond to the film, and he said he had mixed feelings about the film because some of the things in the film are painful to hear, and that also there are things in the film that he feels very good about. Specifically, he told me particular things. So this is news, but time changes people's perspective, and I understand
Well,
that completely.
Without getting into he said, she said here today, we have had several conversations with my management team and between me and you and the producer about certain things and how they were positioned, and then they didn't come to fruition. So,
but I would imagine if you didn't approve of the final cut, you wouldn't be out promoting it.
well, I am who I am, and I have no choice. You know, again, it's a calling. It's not a career. It's a calling. And so consequently, what I am here to do is to take what we've done and to hopefully use that to inspire. And again, I'll go back to your initial comments. It's really important to me that you said it was inspiring for you, because
It's very inspiring for me. I mean, you don't see someone go through the kind of rise and fall like you've been through and then invite people in to watch the most painful parts of you know, as you put it in the film. And one of the reasons why I think the movie's so timely, Jenny, you talk about being in your mid-50s and trying to start your whole career over again during a period of our economy when a lot of folks in their mid-50s are facing the same thing. And Jenny, CNN, of course, has promoted the film very, very heavily. What do you hope people take away from your movie?
Wow. I mean, there's so much. I feel like the most important thing for me in making the movie was to raise all these questions about who we are, who we listen to, how we feel about ourselves. And I feel like the film in the end still asks those questions. I don't think it answers those questions.
I agree.
And that's what's important to me.
It's quite an achievement, and James, just so you know, it means a lot to us that you would come here, and I want you to know that watching this film, the audience is rooting for you. Trust me, we're rooting for you by the end of this movie.
I appreciate that. I've heard that before, and that means a lot to me.
Enlighten Us premieres on CNN this Friday and on CNN Go on December 2nd. Quite an achievement by filmmaker Jenny Karchman. And I look forward, James, to seeing what the future holds for you. We have a lot of mutual friends. I'd love to have you back anytime. Half an hour is not enough to discuss this work. Thank you both.
Thank you,
We'll be
John.
right back. This is Insight.